Hi, can everyone hear me? All right. So it's a little bit after 10, so we want to get started. We realize that everyone has a very busy schedule, so thank you for coming out today. My name is Jessica Burke. I am the General Counsel for the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development, and this is a workshop on opportunity zones. So again, thank you for coming out on a Tuesday morning to spend some time learning about this new opportunity. Who here knows what opportunity zones are already? Fantastic. And just so I know kind of the mix of the crowd, how many are here from communities, mayors, judge executives? All right. How many are here as business developers? And do we have any investors here? All right, so a great mix. So you know what to expect, what we're going to do today is go through kind of the nuts and bolts of the opportunity zones, what they are, how they were selected, where they are, how you get investments in them, what investments can be made in opportunity zones, how those investments are made, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. We will try to get you out of here by 11:30. We know you have other things to do, but I will be available after the seminar as well if you have any lingering questions. And we'll also give you our contact information at the cabinet. Feel free to contact us at any point if you think of something after you go home or something comes up later. Before we get started today, we do have a video from Governor Bevin. He could not be here with us today, but he did want to express his support for you being here today.
Hi, this is Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin. Thank you for being here today. I wish I could be there with you in person, but I'm grateful for your interest in opportunity zones, your willingness to come out to learn more, to look at ways in which you can invest in making Kentucky the greatest version of itself possible. This came out of federal tax policy that came out in the end of 2017. And then in April of 2018, announcements were made about these opportunity zones. And then in recent months, there have been announcements coming from Treasury that spelled out some of the details of exactly how these work. Kentucky is one of the very first states to apply for and receive approval for these opportunity zones. We have designated 144 zones in 84 counties. They are from east to west, north to south. They are in rural and urban communities. These are communities that have tremendous untapped potential, that have been historically more economically depressed than other areas, but sometimes just for lack of capital. Now there are financial incentives for people to be able to invest in these communities. Thank you for wanting to learn more. Ask questions, take notes, challenge one another, share information. Make sure you reach out to our Cabinet for Economic Development during the course of this session and the days to come, because we want to work with you to make Kentucky the greatest version of itself that it can possibly be. This is for people inside our state and outside who want to invest for a great return on that investment right here in the Commonwealth. We are Kentucky.
And before we get into the substance of today, I do want to thank the University of Kentucky for hosting us today, especially in this beautiful student center. I am a graduate of the University of Kentucky, and this is incredibly nice. It is a big improvement over the old center, so I appreciate being here today. So what are opportunity zones? The opportunity zones, these are low-income, distressed census tracts. And that has a whole lot of meaning packed into that one small sentence. This is, of course, coming from the federal government. And so the federal government defined what low income meant, they defined what distress meant, and they defined census tracts, which means that here at the state level, while we are getting the chance to administer this, we were confined by what the federal government told us we could do. And so the opportunity zones that we could select here at the state level were based on what the federal government defined as low income and distressed, and they were defined by the preset federal census tracts. And so a question we get a lot is, why are the boundaries of the opportunity zones kind of weird sometimes? And it's because those boundaries were set by the census tracts. We couldn't change those. So when we were selecting opportunity zones at the state level, we had no control over where those boundaries were. We could only pick the set census tracts. These opportunity zones can be used for a variety of economic development projects. These aren't just for real estate or just for manufacturing or just for rural or urban development. These are for a variety of projects across the Commonwealth, and that's why we're so excited for them. And these are effective for 10 years. These came into effect in December of 2017 as part of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. They're set for 10 years, and they're not going to change. The opportunity zones won't change. Where they are won't change. These are set in stone for 10 years. It would take an act of Congress to change them. It's not going to happen. So here's kind of where these came from. A lot of people are wondering if these came out back in 2017, why are we just now really starting to hear about them? Why are we, really starting to push them now? It's because it's from the federal government. It took a while to get things ramped up. So the law passed on December 22nd, 2017, 3 days before Christmas. And in that law, there were about 4 pages, this giant tax law. There were about 4 pages containing the Opportunity Zones legislation. That was in December. That law gave states 90 days to select where their Opportunity Zones would be. No one can tell me why they only gave the states 90 days. That is, if you've worked in government or have ever worked with the government, that's an incredibly short amount of time to get anything done. And I can't get a good reason why it was that short from the federal government, but that's where it was. And so at the end of 2017, early 2018, the Cabinet for Economic Development got very busy trying to decide where we should put these opportunity zones here in Kentucky to do the greatest good. And we'll go through exactly how we did that in just a second. But on March the 21st, Kentucky was one of the first states to submit our opportunity zone designations to the Treasury Department for confirmation. And then April 9th, we got that confirmation and became one of the first states to have our opportunity zones officially designated. Now, what zones actually qualified as opportunity zones? So what do we have to pick from? To qualify as low income, a tract had to have a poverty rate of at least 20%, or if you were in a metropolitan area such as here in Lexington, you could have up to 80% of the median family income of your entire metro area, or up to 80% of the median family income of the state as a whole. If you're in a non-metropolitan area like most of Kentucky is, you could have up to 80% of the statewide median income of Kentucky. So those were the tracts that qualified as opportunity zones. There were 573 of those census tracts throughout Kentucky. The law allowed us to pick up to 25% of those as opportunity zones. So we could pick a quarter of those and designate those as opportunity zones. And then 5% of those could be what's called contiguous tracts, kind of could piggyback off of other low-income tracts. And so 8 of those could be contiguous tracts, 8 of our 144. So when we sat down and we figured out, okay, how in 90 days are we going to pick what tracts in Kentucky are going to be opportunity zones, and what is the best way to do this? Because we were a whole new program, never been done before, we had no guidelines. We decided that we absolutely did not want this to be a political process. We didn't want this to be a, where's my hometown, where do my friends live? We wanted this to be a very data-driven, very community-driven process. And so we came up with a 4-step process for designating the opportunity zones in Kentucky. You'll see the flow chart here. The first step that we did, there was a national nonprofit, the Economic Innovation Group, that was really involved in the opportunity zones legislation. And they put out a map for every census tract in the country that qualified as an opportunity zone. And they took those tracts and they put together data on housing and economic stability and health and education and economic security and mobility. I think I said one of those twice. And so what we did is we looked at that data and we picked the bottom 60% of Kentucky's qualified opportunity zones, basically the most needy of our needy tracts. And from that we derived what we called our ideal opportunity zone map. Where would these designations do the most good in Kentucky? So that was completely data-driven, put in information, get information out, no subjective movement on our part. But we also understood that data can only tell you so much. These are real communities we're talking about, real people, real businesses, and the local communities would know more about their communities than we at the state level did, more than people at the Economic Innovation Group did, definitely more than the federal government would. And so we sent out a request for information to every judge executive, mayor in Kentucky. We sent it out to industry groups, economic development groups, sent it out on social media, basically any way we could. And we asked local governments to tell us where in your communities would most benefit from being designated as an opportunity zone. And don't tell us just the census tract, but tell us what's there to invest in, what would be there to invest in if you had, the capital coming in because of opportunity zones. Our thinking being that there's no reason to designate a field as an opportunity zone that will always be a field. There has to be something there to make this worthwhile. And so we sent that out, and from that we got 67 responses back. Some of those were from individual counties. The vast majority of those were from groups. So Northern Kentucky submitted a regional response. One East Kentucky submitted a regional response. We had a few economic development groups submit regional responses. And so we took those responses and we used those responses to tweak that ideal map that we identified in step 1. And so if a county had received, say, 2 tracts on that ideal map in step 1, but that county had responded to our request for information and said, no, actually, these other 2 tracts would be much more beneficial, we moved those tracts over to where the county would like them to be. Our third step, the criteria for opportunity zones is very similar to new market tax credit criteria. If you work in that space, they're very similar. And so we looked at communities that had already attracted investments through the new market tax credit program. Our thinking behind that was a community who'd gotten those investments had already demonstrated the ability to attract investments, and this would be an extra impetus behind those investments. So that added a handful of tracts to our opportunity zone map. And then our fourth step, if a county had submitted a response to our request for information, and they did not otherwise have a zone on the map already, we gave them a zone. And if a county had a zone on the map and had not responded to our request for information, we took them off of the map. And the reason for that is the success of this program is going to depend very heavily on local involvement, state involvement, and so we wanted to make sure that we had a limited number of zones we could award. We wanted to make sure that these were in communities where we would get that local involvement and local input. And so that's how we came up with our 144 opportunity zones. I get questions a lot about how did this specific zone get selected, this specific tract, and I'll tell you if you have those questions today. This was a year ago. I won't remember off the top of my head, but if you email me, I can look at my notes and tell you exactly how any specific tract was selected. So from that process, we came up with 144 zones. That's the maximum number that Kentucky could select, and those are in 84 counties across Kentucky. If you look here, the green are the opportunity zones, and as you can see, they're spread out across Kentucky. They're in the east, the west, north, south, central Kentucky, urban and rural areas. There's an opportunity zone within driving distance of every Kentuckian, and that is by design. We want to make sure that this is something that benefits the entire state, not just certain areas, not certain regions, and not certain demographics. So how do you tell, looking at a map and saying, great, they're in 84 counties, there's 144 of them, that's not really useful for you at a real useful level. What's useful for you is knowing exactly where those zones are, right? And so we've tried to make that easy for you to figure out. If you go to our website, Kentucky has a website dedicated exclusively to opportunity zones here in Kentucky, kyoz.com. I'll say it a bunch more times before the day's up, but we have on that website a lot of information about the opportunity zones. That's where you'll find this presentation after the day is over. But we also have on that website several maps. This is one of the maps on the front page of that website. The yellow areas are the counties that have opportunity zones. The blue areas are the zones themselves. And what you can do on this map is you can click down just like you would on, say, a Google map, and you can click down to street level. So if you want to know, say, in Bowling Green, where the opportunity zones are, and Bowling Green does have one, it's just a little small there, you can keep clicking down and you can see exactly where the parameters of that zone are. If something turns blue, it is an opportunity zone. White is not an opportunity zone. We also have these maps that show more just kind of an overview. So every county that has a zone has their own page. You can click on the counties, This is Pulaski County, so you can tell that their zones are in the north and the south end of the county. And then here in Fayette County, there are your zones. You can tell they're clustered in the center. Again, this was based on local input, trying to develop that downtown area. Another really cool feature we have is if you go to the map on the front page and you want to know if a certain address is in an opportunity zone, you can type in the address. There's a search bar. My laser pointer's not working. But in the top right-hand corner, there is a search bar, again, just like Google Maps. You can type in the address, and it will zoom directly to that address. Here we have put in 369 East Vine Street. Where is that? Who knows? Rupp Arena. I was going to say, we're in Lexington. Somebody better know. That is Rupp Arena. As you can see, it turned blue. So Rupp Arena is in an opportunity zone. And you can see the streets around it. You can see exactly where the borders of that opportunity zone are. You can see it kind of runs right along 60 there. Main Street is in an opportunity zone until it gets to 60. And then there's kind of the border there. So you can see exactly down to street level where the borders of that zone are. And again, the borders were based on the census tracts, and that's why they look a little odd. If we were drawing those, we probably would have drawn those to make a little more sense. This is 1732 Richmond Road here in Lexington, and where's that? That's Coach Cal's house. As you can see, that turned white. That is not an opportunity zone. He does not live in a distressed area. We're all surprised. But again, you can see the streets around it. And if you kept scrolling more toward downtown, it would turn blue again as you get back into the opportunity zones. So now you know what they are, you know how we pick them, you know how to find out exactly where they are down to the address. So now how do you invest in these opportunity zones? The question that everyone has. So investments in these zones have to be made through opportunity funds. And these are special funds that are set up specifically to invest in opportunity zones. Qualified opportunity funds can be set up as either a partnership or a corporation. LLCs count, so you and your buddy can set up an opportunity fund. You can incorporate a corporation just by yourself, set up an opportunity fund. It's designed to be fairly easy. I know that when a lot of people hear fund, they're thinking Wall Street, they're thinking big complex securities laws. And you certainly can set up that kind of fund in this situation, but it can also be you investing your own capital gains, a fairly easy and straightforward ordeal. So once you have your opportunity fund set up, and then you, or you can have other people contribute as well, roll in your capital gains into that fund. Only capital gains can be invested in a qualified opportunity fund to get the tax benefits. You can technically put other money into the opportunity funds if you wanted to, but there's absolutely no tax benefit to doing so. So there might be a reason for you to do so, but there's no tax benefit. To be a qualified opportunity fund, you don't have to get approval from anybody. You don't have to get approval from the state. You don't have to get approval from the IRS before you do it. A qualified opportunity fund can be an organization that you already have set up. If you have your own LLC, you can turn that into an opportunity fund. You can set up a new organization to be an opportunity fund. It's pretty flexible. What you do have to do is when you file your taxes at the end of the year, you have to submit a form with those taxes that certifies that you do have an opportunity fund. The draft form of that document is available on the IRS's website. The final form is not available yet. We're going back to why we're just now starting to really push these. The IRS is taking their sweet time getting all the information out. But the draft form is out there for you to see. So why would someone put their money in an opportunity fund rather than really any other investment, right? These are in distressed areas. They're most likely slightly riskier investments, at least, than other investments would be. The reason is that Congress has decided to let people have some really fantastic tax benefits for investing in opportunity funds and thus in opportunity zones rather than elsewhere. The first benefit is you get a deferral of your taxes. So say you have capital gains this year that you would have to pay taxes on. If you put those into an opportunity fund, you can defer those taxes until December of 2026 or until you sell or exchange those gains, whichever comes first. And so that means I use easy numbers. I'm an attorney, not an accountant. But if you had $100 in capital gains taxes this year that you would have to pay taxes on, you roll it into an opportunity fund instead. You don't have to pay taxes on that money until December of 2026. So you get out paying taxes for a little bit. The second and better benefit you get, though, is you get a step up in basis. And so if you hold that money in an opportunity fund for 5 years, you get a 10% step up in basis. If you hold it there for 7 years, you get an additional 5% step up in basis. So if you leave your money in an opportunity fund for 7 years, you've wiped out 15% of your tax liability. So going back to your $100 in capital gains, you have it this year, you put it in an opportunity fund, you hold it there for 7 years. At the end of that 7 years, you only have to pay tax on $85 of the original $100 that you would have had to pay taxes on. And so you've wiped out some of your tax liability. Maybe not such a big deal if we're talking about $100. We're talking bigger numbers. It adds up really quickly. But the third and the kind of big carrot here is you get a total exclusion on taxes for any money that grows while it's in the opportunity fund, as long as you hold it there for 10 years. And so taking our $100, we put our $100 in capital gains into an opportunity fund, we leave it there for 10 years. You then only pay tax on $85 of your original investment. But say that $100 grows to $1,000 over the time you hold it in that fund. You've now made $900 completely tax-free. That's the big advantage of these funds. And I know that some of you are already doing the math. These opportunity zones are good for 10 years. That started in December 2017. You have to hold the investment for 10 years. You're going to run out of time, right? The IRS has actually said that you can hold those investments until 2047 before you have to divest them and realize those advantages. And so you can invest in opportunity zones through these funds anytime in the 10 years the opportunity zones are active. Hold it until 2047 and realize the complete exclusion of your gains. So huge, huge benefit here. This just goes through the example that I gave you, kind of going through the same thing. But if you look down at the bottom, assuming that all other things being equal with the investment, you're looking at a 5.8% return compared to a 2.8% return in a normal fund, not an opportunity zone fund, because of the deferrals and the exclusions. So big deal for investors. So the point of these tax incentives are not just to provide a tax shelter to investors. They're great benefits for investors, and that's fantastic. But the point of this law was to encourage development in distressed areas of this country. And there are several safeguards in place in the law to make sure that's what these are used for. And we're going to go through them a bit. But I want everyone to realize exactly how much money we're talking about here. The Economic Innovation Group estimates that there's $6.1 trillion of capital gains just sitting in portfolios. And that's what this law was aimed at, is getting that money out and deployed into these distressed areas around the country to spur economic development. Here's kind of how we expect things to progress. And we're already past this a little bit, but in 2018, the IRS did release the self-certification fund that you attached your taxes to say that you are a qualified opportunity fund. That is not final yet. We expect it to be. In 2018, we did expect the IRS to release regulations telling us exactly how all this would work. Remember I told you the law that was included in the 2017 Tax Cut Act was about 4 pages. The IRS in October of 2017 released about that many regulations. Very thick packet, very interesting reading if anyone is bored. But those were the draft regulations. Those were not final. There was a public comment period. That was delayed a bit because you might remember the government shut down for a bit. And so the actual hearing on those regulations was delayed. They did have that. And so now we are expecting the final regulations at any time. I understand that the IRS has drafted those and they are awaiting approval, but there are final regulations still to come. You can, if we tell you something today that is in the draft regulations, you are fine to operate under those. Those are safe. There's a safe harbor. You can go ahead with confidence, but do be aware those regulations may change at least a little bit when we get those final regulations. As we go through 2019, we expect a whole lot of activity this year. We're already seeing a lot of activity from major national funds. They've raised money. They're starting to look at investments, starting to invest in projects around the country. Here in Kentucky, I know we've gotten interest from some of those funds as well. I've heard a lot of people call me, make contact, where they've set up funds for their own business, or it's a small family trust, or so. We have a wide range of interest here in Kentucky, from the giant national funds to our family trust has some capital gains, and we set up this opportunity fund we set up an opportunity fund specifically to fund our business. We've got the gamut going here in Kentucky. And so there's activity going on. Right now it's mostly focused toward real estate, and that is in large part because everyone is waiting to see what the final IRS regs say. But again, it's going to be used for a wide range of things. So we expect that the real estate investment to keep going through 2019. Once we get these final regs, we expect to see more investment in businesses and some other projects. And then in 2020 and 2021, that investment will keep going. And then we expect it to probably taper off after that, because you won't get the full deferral benefit after that point. So what are we doing here in Kentucky? Remember, this whole thing is part of the federal tax code. So the state level, we don't actually have to do anything. You at the local level, you don't have to do anything. But why wouldn't we? We want to make sure that when these trillions of dollars are floating around out there, we make it as easy as possible for investors to put that money here in Kentucky. We want it to be, hey, here you go, here's our projects, make it one-stop shop, easy to invest. So Kentucky was one of the first states, as we mentioned earlier, to have our zones certified, because we thought there was a real benefit to being the first out of the gate, the first advertising, the first to say, hey, we're here and we're open for business. And we've really seen that some of the national groups that are monitoring this have told us that we're ahead of the game. That's where we want to be, that's where we want to stay. The Cabinet for Economic Development has been charged by the governor with administering this program, for making sure that our communities and our businesses and our investors can take advantage of this to do the most good. And we're working as closely as we can with our local governments and our local communities, and you'll see that ramp up throughout 2019. Again, all of our information, kyoz.com, all the information that we have is on there, and we'll continue to put additional information on there. When the new regulations come out, hopefully in the next week or two, they will go on that website as well as a summary for you to see. So I know quite a few of you said you were here from communities, so how do you maximize this benefit, this opportunity for your community? Unfortunately, investors are probably not going to show up on your courthouse steps with a bag of money saying, here, what do we do with it? That would be great, but probably not going to happen. So what we're asking our local communities to do is to be very proactive, very aggressive in developing a marketing strategy to market your opportunity zones, your opportunity zone projects, your businesses. And remember, we got requests for information, answers back from every community that got an opportunity zone in Kentucky. And so I read every one of those, every word. So I know that there are projects that can be invested in every single opportunity zone that we selected. And so we're asking our local communities to help us be very proactive in marketing those. And we'll get into a little later on how we're helping you do that. Consider companion programs and incentives. This is a provision of the tax code. So this does not preclude state tax incentives, local tax incentives, public-private partnerships. All those things can be used in conjunction with this to make your investments more lucrative for investors. And so if you have a building that your community owns, your county owns, you're looking for something to do with it, you're looking for a private investor, a private partner, you can absolutely do that. One thing we always tell people is you don't have to let us at the state level know what you're doing with these. It's completely private sector driven. That's the beauty of it. But we encourage you to do so. One, because we like to know these are going well, but two, because we can be very helpful as far as resources, connecting you with other things that might be helpful. And again, you can layer on state tax incentives and state programs on top of this, but you can only do that if you let us know before you get started. Once a project's underway, there's not a lot we can do. So keep us in the loop, let us know what you're doing, let us be helpful. The other thing is, remember, these opportunity zones are only 25% of the low-income communities in this state. Remember, there's only 84 counties with these zones. We want this to be a benefit to the entire state. Unfortunately, we are well past the point where we can operate as 120 separate little counties in Kentucky and expect to be successful. We have to think regionally. We have to operate more outside of our borders. And so we encourage you to work with the communities around you, the counties around you, really take a regional approach, make yourself as attractive as you can to investors, and so pull in other resources to go with your projects to make them really a holistic marketing opportunity. Going back to the opportunity funds, they do have to be certified twice a year. Let me back up. You don't have to certify them with your form at the end of the year with your taxes, but they are tested twice a year. So to be a qualified opportunity fund, you have to have 90% of your assets in opportunity zone property. And that is tested twice a year, once 6 months after you form and once at the end of the year, regardless of when you formed. You get to tell the IRS when you formed for purposes of this testing, and then you have to submit at the 6-month mark and at the end of the year documentation letting them know that you've met your 90% assets in the opportunity zones test. And this is to certify, or this is to make sure that people who are getting these tax benefits are actually using those funds to benefit these opportunity zones. So 90% is the magic number there. You'll see that we do have a form already, Form 8996, if anyone is taking notes. That's to certify that you have that 90% asset test met. And here's how you decide whether you've met your 90%. You look at your financial statements, and if you don't have financial statements for some reason, you look at the value of your assets, and that's how you determine if you have your 90% met. Again, pre-existing entities can qualify as opportunity funds, but you want to be really careful there because, one, you have to meet your 90% test, and so if you have other assets in your entity, that can be tricky. A lot of people are setting up separate entities for their opportunity funds to make sure they meet that 90%. And also, to qualify as opportunity zone property, that property had to have been obtained after December 2017 when the law was passed. And so if you had pre-existing property, that is not going to count as your opportunity zone property. To qualify as an opportunity or a qualified opportunity fund investment, it has to be an equity investment, which can be a partnership interest or it can be stock. So you can't make loans to businesses and consider that opportunity fund investment. It has to be an actual equity interest. Again, this goes back to the whole point of this is to encourage development in these communities, long-term stability, and so they don't want people coming in, making loans, getting their 10-year tax benefits, pulling out and going away. So it does have to be an equity investment. Remember, 90% of your assets as an opportunity fund have to be an opportunity zone property. And what opportunity zone property is gets kind of very technical and very tricky. This, again, is all based on the IRS regulations, not so much on the law. And so this could change. And I know that there were several changes to this requested in the public comment period. And so I encourage you to keep an eye out, keep an eye out on kyoz.com. We will post changes if they come out with this next round of regulations. But right now, if an opportunity fund operates a business directly, so that means that I own Acme Manufacturing. I have set up the Acme Opportunity Fund to fund my manufacturing business, and so that fund is operating the business directly. Then 90% of the business assets have to be opportunity zone property. Opportunity zone property has to be in an opportunity zone, easy enough, but it has to require that new capital be deployed in the opportunity zone, and it also requires that 50% of the income be derived from active conduct. Basically, what they're getting at here is your business has to do something. You have to be operating a business, and so you can't use this to buy property in an opportunity zone and hold it. You actually have to be investing in the community, have something going there. If your opportunity fund is investing in another business, so you're not operating your own business, but you have your fund and you are investing in company A and company B, then you have to make sure that those companies are opportunity zone businesses as well. And to qualify, those businesses have to have at least 70% of their tangible assets in an opportunity zone. And so I get a lot of questions of, is XYZ an opportunity zone business? And they'll give me the address. Well, that doesn't answer the question. So a business can have an address in an opportunity zone, but 80% of their assets be outside the zone, and they will not be an opportunity zone business. On the flip side, their address can be outside the zone. They have 70% of their assets in the zone. They're now going to be an opportunity zone business. This is the big change that Kentucky has requested to the regulations, because we think that, if a business has multiple locations, it makes sense to require 70% of the assets be in opportunity zones, right? You want to make sure that businesses that are benefiting from this are actually helping opportunity zones. Our problem is that we have several businesses that are coming to Kentucky, starting in Kentucky, that are completely in an opportunity zone, except there's a census line going through that business, literally through the business. And so some of the businesses in the zone, some of the businesses outside the zone, and it's all because of that arbitrary census line. And so we have businesses where 68% of the assets are in the zone, the rest of it are out of the zone. So technically that business does not qualify under this regulations as an opportunity zone business. We have asked the IRS to change that so that businesses that are straddling the census tract, as long as substantially more is in the zone than out, it would qualify as an opportunity zone business. Because our argument is that those businesses are doing what was intended by this law. They are helping those zones, they're helping those distressed areas, and that mirrors some other provisions of the tax code. We don't know if they will make that change. Until they do, we have to default back to the 70%, but be aware that we have asked for that change. The business has to be a qualified opportunity business, both when the fund acquires an interest in that business and for substantially all of the time that the fund owns interest in that business. This is one of those times you're seeing substantially all quite a bit in these regulations. It's not consistent what that means, and this is one of those times it's not really defined. We expect the IRS to probably define that a little bit more, but basically make sure that is an opportunity zone business when you get an interest in it, and it remains an opportunity zone business at least the majority of the time that you have an interest in it. Real property is a little tricky, further tricky, when it comes to whether something is opportunity zone business or not. And so if you have real property, remember tangible assets have to be in the opportunity zone. For 70% of the tangible assets have to be in the opportunity zone for it to be an opportunity zone business. And if the opportunity fund is operating a business directly, 90% of the assets have to be opportunity zone business property. For real property to be considered opportunity zone property, the original use has to be with the opportunity fund or the opportunity zone business, which means it has to be a new building, or the property has to be substantially improved. And what that means is that if a fund or an opportunity zone business buy a building, they have to put the same amount into that building to improve it within 30 months. You exclude the basis of land from that calculation. And so how this works is if you as the opportunity fund or the opportunity zone business buy a building and land for $130,000, and the building was $100,000, the land was $30,000, you don't have to worry about that $30,000 land, but you then have to put another $100,000 into that building within 30 months for that to count as opportunity zone business property. There is a safe harbor in all of this. So the IRS realizes, as I'm sure many of you have, that you cannot spring a business fully formed out of the ground as soon as this law went into effect or as soon as you gather all your funds. We all know that the way this works is you have to get your financing, right, before you can build the business. And so you'd have to get your money into your opportunity fund to get the business going in a lot of cases. And so the IRS is given a 31-month safe harbor. And so you have 31 months where you can basically develop a business plan, and as long as you follow that business plan and actually form an opportunity zone business or invest in opportunity zone business property in that 31 months, then you're considered to have met your requirements in that 31 months. Going over to the investment side, what can investors invest in these opportunity funds? Again, it can only be capital gains before you can get the tax benefits. And investors have 180 days from the time that that gain would have been realized to get it into an opportunity fund to get the tax benefits. That can be at the time of the sale. That can be when those gains would have been realized on your federal income tax. It really depends on the type of the sale. That's something you should talk to your accountant about. But you have 180 days from the date that your gain would have been realized to get it into an opportunity fund. If you do it on day 181, you won't get any of the tax benefits. So very important number there, 180 days. The attributes of the gain stay with those gains while they're in the fund, and you can't double dip. So see here, gains not already subject to an election. Basically all that is saying, you can't use your gains. If you've used gains to invest in one opportunity fund, you can't then use those gains to invest in another opportunity fund. If you have a pass-through entity, like an S corporation or a partnership, then either the partnership or the partners can use those gains to invest in opportunity funds. So if your partnership has gains, that partnership can then, within 180 days of realizing that gain, the partnership itself can invest in an opportunity fund, or they can elect not to, pass those gains down to their individual partners, and those partners then have 180 days from the time that they realize those gains to get those into an opportunity fund. But it's an either-or situation. Both the partnership and the partners cannot take advantage of the same gains. We here in Kentucky are lucky. Not every state is in this situation, but last year Kentucky passed tax reform, and so we coupled our taxes with the federal code, and so Kentucky will treat capital gains the same way as the federal government does, which means that if your gains are deferred at the federal level, they'll be deferred for taxation on your Kentucky state taxes as well. If there are some of the gains that are excluded at the federal level, they'll be excluded at the state level as well. And so you get kind of a double benefit with your state and your federal taxes here in Kentucky. And again, not every state has that, so if you're looking to invest in other states, hopefully not, keep it here in Kentucky. But if you do, make sure you check those state tax codes to see if that's true or not. So at the Cabinet, we are trying to work with our communities to make it as easy as possible to get your projects out in front of investors. Like I said, we do have investors calling us fairly regularly, wanting to know what projects we have here in Kentucky. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to have investors calling us and say, hey, I'm looking for a hotel development, and we have to send them to just one project. We don't like to play winners and losers at the Cabinet. That's not how we do business. We are here to serve the entire state. And so what we want to do is when these investors call us, we want to be able to show them an entire menu of projects from across the state that would fit what they're looking for. And so what we're asking is that our communities, our business developers, our business owners, send us what you have that is eligible for investment by these opportunity funds. That could be your own private business, that could be your real estate development that you're developing, that could be on your community, a building that your county owns that you're looking to turn into an industrial center. It could be a tourism development. There's a wide range of projects that we're looking for. So if you go again to kyoz.com, you will see two buttons at the top. One says post projects, and the other one is for opportunity funds. If you have a fund that you want people to come pitch projects to, we can put that on our website as well, and people can contact you directly. This is all voluntary. We want your permission before we put your information on our website. But with your projects, you see here we want a map of the project site, and again, we're not looking for anything specific here. Basically, show us where it is. We need the county. Once you put in the county, the Opportunity Zone ID will populate. Name your project. This just gives us something to call it. Give us the address. I know that for some of these projects there is not an address yet. It's undeveloped land. That's fine. Just give us some idea of where it is. 3 miles out of downtown. Some idea of where we can locate it. Tell us what kind of project it is. Is it a new construction? Is it residential housing? Is it mixed use? Is it a tourism project? Is it something we've not thought about? Is it retail? And then describe the project for us. And then of course we need the point of contact. Who do we call when we get someone interested in this? Now I want to make it very clear, this form is the basic information we need. This is the starting point. Do not feel that this is all you can give us or that you're constrained by this form. If you have other information about your project, if you have videos or the drone video, or you have animations, or you have drawings, or you have a business plan, send that to us and we can get it on our website. We have a top-notch marketing web development team. I don't know how they do it, I can't tell you, but they can get it on our website. And think of this as the windows when our investors are window shopping. We send them to this portal, they're looking through what is going to make them stop in front of your window and take a closer look. This is your marketing opportunity for investors looking to invest in Kentucky. Same thing I just told you, make it interesting. I know we're a government agency, but we at the cabinet are the salespeople for the Commonwealth. We need you to sell your areas, sell your businesses, sell your projects, and we will help you out as much as we can. If you have questions, let us know. We'll be happy to help you. I know that a couple of the questions we've gotten is a couple of communities needed help mapping out their project, laying over some topography with some easements and those kind of things. We can certainly do that. We can help you out with that. So we're here to help. Now, we rolled this out in December, and we've learned a few lessons since then that you now get to benefit from. We've learned some, these are good things, but here's how you can do it better to help you sell your communities. One of the things that we have gotten, is we wanted to build cabins and camping spaces to attract visitors, basically a tourism development. That's good. But what would be better is something like this, where it's showing photos, it's showing what's there already, what the opportunities are. Here, you can partner with One West, the Louisville Urban League. Where is it? More information is better. Visualization is better. And I'm going to be showing you a lot of slides from Louisville, and that's not because we are favoring Louisville over any other community in the state, but we are fortunate here in Kentucky. There was a national nonprofit that put together a how to market communities for opportunity zone investment plan, and they picked 3 cities from around the country to use as models, and one of those was Louisville. It was Louisville, South Bend, and I'm forgetting the third one. But we're fortunate we have a Kentucky City in that ideal plan. And so we use Louisville as the model. If you go to kyoz.com, you will actually see that step-by-step guide on how to market your communities. It uses Louisville as the model, but it also tells you how to adapt that to any community. Something else we have 175 acres ready for development. Fantastic. And there are investors who are looking for just land. But what is better is if we can visualize that, show us where it is, where it falls in the larger community, what's around it. Again, pictures are good. Show us what could go there. Could it be retail? Could it be office space? Again, this doesn't limit the investors and what they can do. They can certainly be creative, but at least give them an idea of what you think could go there. We have an empty building we want to repurpose. There are a lot of those in Kentucky. What makes yours special? Louisville has the Louisville Gardens. They tell you what's special about that. It's this big arena, it has so many seats. It's in the middle of West Louisville. You can partner with the city. Absolutely mention that if you as a community are willing to partner with an investor. That makes it seem a lot safer, lets them know you're behind the project. Another example from Louisville, this is over on the Logan Street Market. Again, shows you renderings of what it could look like, really brings alive the project for the investors. And then the questions that I get asked most often at these type of events, why is my area not in an opportunity zone? We went through how they were selected. If yours is not in an opportunity zone, if your county does not have an opportunity zone, your county did not respond to the request for information, unfortunately. And we realized it was done very quickly. That was an effect of us having only 90 days to do it. But if you let us know that you're interested in working with other communities that do have them, we will certainly help you figure out how to benefit from these. The other one I get is, if you do have an opportunity zone, can you expand it? Can you move it? The answer is no. Again, these are set in stone for 10 years based on the census tracts, so we don't have any control over the boundaries, and they cannot be moved. A question I get quite often is, well, we have this new development coming in now that we didn't know about. Can we switch our opportunity zones? And if it were up to the state, we would certainly consider it, but we don't have that option. The federal government will not let us. This is the question that I kind of got into earlier. What if a project is partially in a zone and partially not in a zone? That is where we get into that 70%. 70% of a business's assets or a project's assets have to be in the opportunity zone to qualify as an opportunity zone business at this point. We are hopeful that they will change the regulations to make that easier to qualify if they're literally straddling the census tract. We'll keep you updated on that, but right now 70% is the magic number. So Kentucky is going to keep working to maximize the benefit to these. We're staying on top of things. We'll be reaching out to individual communities as much as we can. But again, we have a small staff, so we encourage the communities to be proactive, reach out to us, tell us what you need, and we will do everything we can to give you what you need. If you have additional questions, there is the cabinet website, the cabinet email address, econdev@ky.gov. Please feel free to email us, call us. We will get answers to your questions. If we don't have them, we'll get you to who does. And that is, opportunity zone specific questions, or if you have permitting questions or natural resources questions, energy and environment, tourism questions, whatever they are, we can get you to the right people. And it's just letting you know, like I said, if you rely on the regulations as they are written today, there's a safe harbor. You are legally allowed to rely on the regulations as they are written, but do be aware that they will change when the final regulations are released sometime soon. So thank you for coming today, for your attention, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Questions?
So if you sell a piece of real estate and you want to roll the gains into the opportunity zone, you get a deferral on the capital gains and the depreciation recapture, or just the capital gains?
So the question was, if you sell a piece of real estate and you want to roll that into an opportunity fund, do you get the deferral on just the capital gains or the capital gains plus the depreciation? Is that correct? My understanding is just on the capital gains. Yeah. Other questions?
But however, right, it's not determined yet whether the depreciation recapture is subject to the 10-year after the 10-year holding period and then complete deferral
All right.
or elimination of capital gains depreciation recapture considered in that. Not yet determined.
Correct. Yes. Does that answer?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
As a developer, you're developing a new piece of property and you have a tenant on a 10-year lease. Does the tenant have to be opportunity zone?
No.
That percentage doesn't apply to them?
So your question is, if you're developing a piece of property, does the tenant have to be an opportunity zone business? Is that correct? No. Yes. Yes, and that gets back to something I forgot to mention that usually gets asked. So remember I told you that these opportunity zone investments can be used for almost anything. There is an exception. The IRS does not allow these to be used for investments in what the IRS calls sin businesses. I always think it's funny the IRS defines sin, but that includes things like tanning salons, hot tub facilities, liquor stores. But if you have a building that you're investing in and you happen to have a tenant who's a tanning salon, that's fine. You just can't invest directly into the sin business.
I didn't hear any information around banks being investors. What the bank, a lot of banks are required to invest in these type of areas, and it's a regulation.
Mhm.
More banks do that. How is that, I guess, looked upon based on just the investors? As far as partnering with investors, is there different requirements from a bank?
Are there different requirements from a bank for investing in?
The opportunity zone, let's say you have someone who wants to do something,
Mhm.
and the bank can do it to invest as partners.
There are not at this point different regulations for banks who are investing, as long as they're investing just capital gains. Of course, any other laws and regulations would still apply. This doesn't do away with any of, like, securities laws still apply and all that stuff. But banks can certainly invest, and I know that we have been contacted by several national banks that are setting up funds and doing this kind of investing. Does that answer your question? Okay.
How do the
Yes, good question. So the question is, do the funds, basically, do the funds have to invest the money within 180 days? Is that the question? And the answer is no. So you as the investor have to get the money into the fund within 180 days. But as long as the fund has 90% of their assets in opportunity zones, when they do those twice yearly tests, they don't have to get certain money, and there's no time limit on getting certain money deployed. But they do have to meet that 90% test. So they could technically hold your money for 10 years without directly investing that specific money into a project, but as long as that 90% test is met, then you would still get the tax benefits.
So if an individual has capital gains,
Mhm.
do they have to form an LLC or corporation to invest in this?
So the question is, if an individual has capital gains, do they have to form an LLC or a corporation to invest? The answer is no. You have to be a partnership or a corporation to form an opportunity fund. And so if you wanted to form your own fund, you would have to have a partnership or a corporation. But you could also invest in another opportunity fund just as an individual. So if you had your capital gains and you didn't want to set up your own fund, you could go find another fund, put your money into that fund, and just be an investor, and that's all you would have to do.
But the individual can't do their own fund without it being an LLC or corporation.
A partnership or a corporation.
They would have to form.
Yes.
So they're allowed to take those funds out of the individual, put it in the LLC and still profit.
Yes, so the question is, if an individual wants to set up their own fund and make their own investments, correct? Then that individual, I can't just take I can't just take my capital gains and go invest it directly into a business in an opportunity zone and realize the tax benefits. It has to go through a fund. And so what I would have to do as an individual, if I wanted to just keep my money just with myself, is I would have to set up a partnership or a corporation. An LLC would count, so I could set up me LLC, declare it a fund, and then take my capital gains, put it in that fund, and then invest it. Yep. Mhm. Yeah, so the question is, once you set up Me LLC, you put your capital gains into it, then you can hold the money for a period of time until you figure out what to do with it. And the answer is yes. Just remember that 6 months after you form, you have to have 90% of your assets in an opportunity zone property or a business. If you do not, then you're going to pay a penalty. You wouldn't lose your opportunity fund status, but you would pay a penalty at that point. Ye- Correct, correct. You have to get it in there. You have to have at least 90% of those assets deployed at the 6-month period. The question is, can you twin these, basically stack these incentives on top of new market tax credits and historic tax credits? And the answer is yes. And that's going back to, we encourage people before they do projects to contact the state, especially if you're doing, say, like a hotel development, historic tax credits, or something else that there might be state incentives for. We can absolutely stack those on top of the incentives through the opportunity zone. Any other questions?
So in our community, we have some land that is owned by the county, it does have to be restricted, so it can't be sold and has to be used for recreation. But if we want to have somebody come in and help invest to develop this, can they partner with the municipality or county government to do a project?
So the question was, can an investor partner with the municipality or the county to develop county-owned land? The answer is yes. You can actually absolutely do even a P3 or something like that with the project. So there are anti-self-dealing provisions. And why don't you email me and I'll send you that exact language, because it gets pretty technical. So basically, if you're trying to, are you talking in the context of like if you set up your own opportunity fund and you were trying to raise money for, say, the Louisville Gardens and you just couldn't get the investor? So if you'd gotten no investors, it just goes away, right? The fund, no problem. But if you'd raised money into that fund, you could use it for something else. So remember, you have that 31-month safe harbor for non-qualified financial property. So remember, 90% of the assets of your opportunity fund has to be in opportunity zone property, but you have 31 months to basically raise money. So you have to have a business plan in that 31 months. You have to be working toward that business plan, and you have to substantially comply with it. That has not been really well defined by the IRS or what that means, but what people tend to think that means is basically in your scenario, whereas if you had the business plan to restore the Louisville Gardens, but at month 15 it becomes clear that's not going to happen, and you restore something else downtown instead, you're still doing substantially the same thing. Does that make sense, or does that answer your question? And the investors in the fund would still get their tax benefits because it would still be investing in an opportunity zone. So you would still be meeting that requirement to be a fund. Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's correct. And I apologize, I may have skipped over that. So for the deferral, to get the full 7-year deferral of the 15%, obviously if this expires in 2026, this is the year to do it. But if you do it past this year, you would still get the 10% deferral for having it in there for 5 years. And then of course you can hold it to 2047 to get your 10-year exclusion. So you still get the benefits, but the full benefits will expire, or you'll be too late for the full benefits after this year. There is some talk and some hope that Congress will expand the Opportunity Zone program or incentives past 2026 once they see it's working. But of course, there's no guarantee on that. Right. So the first part of your question is the 180 days a challenge as far as finding a fund to put it in? It has been. We have had people call us and say, I have 20 days, where can I put this now? And then we also have projects that are scrambling to get ready to go. And so yes, it's a short amount of time. I think people are figuring it out, but it certainly does put some time crunch, and just like the 90 days they gave us to select the zones, I'm not real sure of the reasoning behind it. And then the second part of your question was, mm-hmm. Yes. So basically, it seems like they would do a longer term deferral if it was within a tax year than at the end of a tax year, but they haven't made that distinction yet. That could change with the regulations that come out, but I've not really seen any movement toward that.
So if an investor is invested in multiple projects or multiple tracts of land in your zone, but they're not contiguous, and one of them is part in the zone, part out of the zone, as long as 70% of the two tracts, so we count the two tracts or just the 70% for one tract, has to be in the zone.
So the 70% comes into play with a business. So is the same business on both tracks?
Yeah, it'd be the same business, but they're not.
Okay. So when you're looking at whether a business has 70% of their assets in an opportunity zone, that is overall. So if a business has multiple locations, as long as 70% of their assets are in a opportunity zone, it doesn't have to all be in one opportunity zone. Does that answer your question? Okay. No, tangible assets. And that's one of the things that the IRS has been requested to tweak, because exactly the question you just came up with, corporate headquarters, IT companies are going to have a lot of assets that aren't necessarily tangible, but are greatly beneficial. So we're hoping that that gets amended in the new regulations. Go ahead. It's based on your financial statements, and if you don't have financial statements, it's based on the cost of the assets themselves. And I think you guys are picking up on this. There's still a lot of bugs in this system. It's a new provision of the tax code. The IRS, like I said, they gave us 90 days, so we had to submit our selections by March of 2018 of which areas would be opportunity zones, and we were very excited, ready to go. And then nothing happened until October as far as getting regulations. And so the IRS has really been struggling to put some rules behind how this will work, and then they're still working on that. And so that's why we're still waiting on final regulations. I anticipate there will still be more bugs to be worked out as things pop up. And I do encourage you to, if you think of things that are not working, would work better, questions that are not answered, send them to us and to the IRS and ask for clarification, because you're not the only one with that question, I assure you. Yeah, I can't give you exact numbers. The question was how many projects have happened. I know there have been several that have already, the businesses have been built. They're going to become operational. I know there are several more in the works. One, because people are not required to tell us what they're doing, and so a lot of what we're hearing is just anecdotal, and partly because of confidentiality of until things become public, we can't talk about them. But it is a good number. There's a lot of movement in Kentucky. The question was, is there a place that funds are required to publicly report how much of their funds are in projects currently? Not that I'm aware. That's a good question, and I will double check, but not that I'm aware.
Has this project brought any overseas interest in Kentucky?
Yes. So the question was, has this brought any international interest to Kentucky? And the answer is yes. We have gotten some interest from international investors. So, any other questions? All right. Well, if you think of anything, again, I will be here for a bit afterwards. And again, there's my personal email or my work email address up on the screen, or econdev@ky.gov. Let us know. We're happy to help. Thank you again.